Okay. Hi, everyone. Let me spotlight Malin. There we go. And hi and welcome to this webinar.
Well, and we're happy to say both good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our participants who are joining us from very many time zones today. So this is the fourth part of our series of the All Eyes on Finance series that we've been having on the Action Plan for Sustainable Finance series. So welcome to this. I would like to hand over and to introduce Arabesque. Maria.
Well, thank you, Malin, for that kind introduction. I hope that everyone can hear me. I'm Maria Mähl, or Maria Mähl, as we say in Swedish. I'm one of the partners of Arabesque, and I'm joined today by my colleague Amesheva, who's a specialist on the new upcoming regulation, and by our new head of Nordics and Europe, Ulrika Hasselgren. I'll be happy to introduce what Arabesque does in just a few minutes, but thank you for having us.
Thank you, Maria. So we are happy to take any questions from you as we go through. Please place them in the chat. So you will find the chat at the bottom if you just scroll your mouse down and where you will see the chat. So please feel free to send chat questions to us if it is to a specific panelist or to the entities. We will be answering them as we go through or at the end. And if they are very long or complex, please feel free to send in your email and we will give you a written response if it's something a little bit more complex, or if you are asking for material that we're referencing to in any case. But we're more than happy to take this from you. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Andreas, who will be doing the majority of the talking, and I will be on the chat.
All right, everyone. So my name is Andreas Filipsson, and I work as a sustainability advisor at Ethos International. Ethos International is as some of you might know, is a management consultancy firm solely based working with sustainability in all its areas. We are verified with accountability to do sustainability assurance. We do audits in accordance with the SA 8000, and we are also a GRI training partner. We have been around for soon to be 14 years, and we're currently 17 people within economics, engineers, legal counsel, environmental experts. And we've had the pleasure of working with over 50 different clients in almost all industry segments in the past 2 years. So yeah.
Thank you, Andreas. Just a few words around Arabesque and what we do. We've been around since 2013, and we started out as an asset manager, managing funds, which we still do. So we have been working on a firm level, trying to solve this new regulation as well. But we're also a data company through our company SRE, and some of you on this call is actually using our data, our raw data, and our scores. And we now developed a new suite of products to support you going further. So we'll discuss a few use cases here as well. And the interesting evolution of data and how data is now interconnected with from the company who are disclosing to the asset manager, to the asset owner, but also the use of technology and how somehow this data is also the two sides of one coin, and how we really need to use technology-based platforms so that this EU regulation doesn't turn into an Excel exercise. So we'll touch a little bit on that and how we can get these processes to be efficient going forward as well. So let's get started.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, the agenda for today is that we'll look at the background. So where did this new regulation come from? It's an important milestone of the EU action plan. So we'll look at an overview of it and also the contents of that action plan. And so the floodgates have opened. So what do we actually need to do now? Is the third sort of thing that we'll be looking at, and then Arabesque will help us on SFDR data solutions and how to actually work with this. So hopefully when we are finished here in 30-40 minutes, you will have tools to actually start working on SFDR compliance. So yeah, so kicking it off with the background, why we are where we are. EU has a sustainability agenda that they want to reach the UN global goals. We want to limit the temperature rise to below 2 degrees. And by doing this, we also have the EU Green Deal and the climate law saying the climate neutrality by year 2050. There's challenges to address. Of course, global emissions continue to increase. In the coming decade, global emissions must be reduced by 50%. And to do this, there's an investment gap, which is why they realized that we need to involve the financial industry as well. So the role of the financial industry is that to create a sustainable economy and achieve the sustainability ambition of the EU. Climate change, as we see today, is already affecting companies' financial stability. There's a lot of sustainability risks currently being investigated and managed. And there's a lot of new business opportunities in a sustainable financial market, which we hope that these regulations will make clear where they are. So to put it all in context, the EU Action Plan on Sustainable Finance is the overarching umbrella of what we will be talking about today. The aim of that action plan is to reorient capital flows towards sustainable investments, to mainstream sustainability in risk management, and also foster transparency and long-termism in decision-making. So by doing this, they've introduced new regulations. It's an action plan of 10 points, but we've highlighted the 4 sort of regulations that we talked about here. And the one we talk about today is the SFDR, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, where disclosure requirements on how sustainability is integrated in the investment and advisory process. You might also be familiar with the EU taxonomy regulation, which in some ways ties into that as well, with the definition of what constitutes a green sustainable activity. You also have a benchmark regulation for standardized sustainability benchmarks for green products. Also, the non-financial reporting directive, NFRD, which has been in place since 2018, is currently seeing an update going on. So we'll see where that ends in a few years, I think. But yeah, so today is an important milestone of sustainable finance. The Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation is actually coming into force today, meaning that there is a lot of things that should have been done by today. So what is this? It's a regulation that sets out new disclosure obligations on financial market participants and advisors in respect of sustainability. There's a regulation on where to put the information. It should be on. We will look at it a little bit detailed soon, but also it should be on the website, and also for certain financial products, it should be in the pre-contractual disclosures. And this does affect both financial market participants, being an alternative investment fund, UCITS, EBIP, manufacturer of pension products. It's also for the financial advisors. But one of the interesting things that hasn't really been mentioned a lot is also that it's affecting the companies indirectly, because this data that we will discuss later on as well, that should be part of these pre-contractual disclosures. They have to come from somewhere, so they have to come from the companies themselves. So there's a data collection process there going on as well, which is a quantitative data to be reported for the fiscal year of 2022. So handing it off to Malin for this one.
Which is, yeah, so basically we are looking at 2 sort of not levels in the sense of being levels, but on the corporate firm level, you do need to disclose on your website for the whole sort of firm entity, different from any products or services. So on the entity level, looking at integration of the sustainability risks, investment processes, investment advice, or insurance advice to describe this. So the disclosure is basically saying how, if these are relevant or if they are not relevant. So you do need to make the distinction in this and explain how and why, giving out these. Further on, the consideration of PI. So PI are principal adverse impact. So saying that both the risks going that you have, but also the outward. So this is an inward and outward approach to sustainability. So the consideration of this outward and inward, the investment decisions and an advice given both for investment or insurance. So these are the two perspectives of the risks and the principal adverse impact that you need to disclose, saying how you stand in these. A little bit different from these two perspectives is the remuneration policy consistency. So here you will need to, on your website, you don't need to disclose your full remuneration policy, but you do need to give the essence, consistency of it, of how you have integrated sustainability of risks into your remuneration policies. So discussing any type of bonuses and how these meet up and are managed with the risks that you take on sustainability areas. So this is on a firm entity level that you need to disclose. In the product level, you do have the most well-known for those who have been reading through are the Article 8 and 8 and 9, but we'll start with the standard financial products. So here it is giving any kind of information in pre-contractual agreements and information, integration of sustainability risks, also the negative impact on the financial return. So this is a little bit different than what type of information most financial market participants are accustomed to. So this is a little bit of a new calculation that needs to be done. Then yet again, the consideration of pi in these products or not, saying a negative statement or consideration. And also the alignment to the taxonomy, a disclaimer on this, because of course this will not be aligned. Then moving on to the more well-known ones of the Article 8 and 9. So starting with 8. These are for products that ones are listed in the regulation that have characteristics of ESG sustainability. So they may not have that as in 9 as an objective, but they have characteristics. Here it is in the prior contractual disclosures on the website with these products and also in the annual report. And we're talking in the same integration of sustainability risks, yet again, the negative impact on the financial return, consideration of the pi being the principal adverse impact. So that is the flip side of the risks, and then the fulfillment of these characteristics. So when you have described the characteristics, then also saying, how are you fulfilling this, this achievement and these statements that you put in the characteristics? And of course, the alignment to taxonomy. For the last group of products, we're looking at the Article 9. So this is anything that has ESG as an objective. So here it is yet the same as in with Article 8, anything with characteristics, pre-contractual disclosures, information. So anything that you give to anybody before signing on, also on the website, and then in your annual report or other periodical reports that you may publish in connection to this. So the first 3 are the same as in others, but then it is also the achievement of the ESG objective. And this is where, I mean, in this achievement of these ESG objectives, this is where you really need to have control of your information and your data. So this is the sort of the first step of getting into that information ecosystem. So here you want to know the companies that put this in, give you the information, if it is from funds or if it is from companies, you will want to have sure that you have information and data that is sorted, digital, and accessible, because you will need to process it yourself to understand the negative impact of the financial return, but you will also need it for the indicators and information in the principal adverse impact. So this is where you need to manage that ingoing data internally, because then yet again to put it out externally towards your customers and your investors in turn of this. We have had a question on this. We will come back to this. It's on the consensus of nuclear power generation. We will put this in writing and be back to it in a moment. We have noted your question. With this, I'll hand back over to Andreas, who's going to take us in a little bit more on how.
Yes, I'm gonna remove the spotlight. There we go. Yeah. So first off, tying on to a little bit about Malin just said about the pies and the sustainability risk. It is basically introducing a two-way impact approach, where from one end you have the sustainability risks, which means the climate impact on the investments. One of the most common ones are if you purchase real estate somewhere close to close to a sort of a borderline where the water will be rising, and then you can lose value of that investment, basically. That's one of the more common one to discuss, but there is also more complex matters on the climate impact on the investments. The other one being the PIEs, which is the principal adverse impact on sustainability factor, which is basically the investments, the climate impact of that investments. So basically it negatively impact the contributing to climate change, so with scope 1, 2, and 3 data. These are a bunch of disclosures that should be that you should report on, basically. So the floodgates have opened. It is today that some of this information should already be in place. So what do we need to do now? Here is the timeline. The draft RTS technical standards have been published. Today, the regulation comes into force where the firm level should have information on the sustainability risk policy, the PI policy, and the remuneration policy as a statement. And on a product level, sustainability risks and impact on the return of the financial product. If it's not considering the PI, disclose a negative statement, and additional disclosures for each ESG products. So today, if you haven't done anything, this is what you should have done. This does not entail quantitative disclosures, but it does entail statements and analysis. In June, we will see sort of for large entities and parents of large groups, the PI considerations coming. From the 1st of January 2022, the detailed information for ESG reports, being the RTS, will be published as well. And for the fiscal year 2022, this is where the quantitative information should have been available for that, both the firm level, but also the financial product.
So going back to this information ecosystem that we were talking about. So you will be expecting that the corporates or the companies who are indirectly affected by the SFDR, so they don't fall under the actual regulation in itself, but they are the ones who do need to provide the information that any asset manager or financial market participant listed in the regulation will have to manage and give disclosure on. And then, of course, this will go from there up to the certain asset owners. So some asset owners are included, others are not, depending on your entity, which is very, very clearly pinpointed in the regulation in itself. But you do have this flow of information, data that will need to go both up, but also down, because you need to get it up to make sure it's actually accurate and verifiable. Then aggregate it, so you want it in a harmonized way, where you do not want to be dealing with this manually, risking mixing up joules, kilowatts, CO2 with CO2 equivalents, common mistakes. So you want this in an aggregated format, and then giving this upwards to or outwards to your customers, but then also putting it back, because you want to do the follow-up, the monitoring, and the understanding of any products you have that do have characteristics or have this as an objective. Are you fulfilling it? And to do the fulfillment, of course, you need to resend data down and have this. So that's why we really emphasize on looking at information and data as an ecosystem, rather than working in a simplified Excel, which is very static and very open to manual problems. So here it's sort of working with your ecosystem of understanding what information do you need, when do you need it, what are you going to do with it, and how are you going to verify it and use it in your process going forward. You can see the red frame, which is the NFDR or the taxonomy. So this is any reporting on sustainability that is mandated for all entities with more than 500 employees within the European Union. The information that you use for the SFDR, the PI, or any of this follow-up on the Article 8 and 9 is usable and interchangeable with the NFDR and taxonomy data and information. So if you get this into an ecosystem, you can start working with all your information together, which is one of the key thoughts you should bear in mind when setting forth on this journey over the year. Because of course, this is something, as Andreas said, you're not looking at to disclosing all of this data in the end of the year. So you really have time to get it right if you just do that thought time first, which is a strong recommendation.
We have a question on this, and from an anonymous attendee who asks if we can elaborate on certain asset owners. What do we mean, and how would this apply to an asset owner outside the EU, but who has assets in the EU?
Let's see if we got that right. So, I mean, let's start with who does not directly apply. I mean, it does not apply to family offices or individual investors. So if you're not using sort of other people's money, you're just sort of doing your own money, or if you are an investment company that you don't take in money, you do not apply to this. So that I would recommend go to the regulation and read. It's very clearly stated. We're happy to share this information with you. So just give us an email and we'll send you the exact phrasing and links. If it is money that is within the European Union, you will have to address this. Accessing data or information from entities outside of the European Union can be tricky. And this is where using aggregated data or AI sort of scope data from any kind of digital system or raw data from Arabesque is useful, because it gets you it takes you a long distance onto this. But it's also taxonomy alignment is coming in to play. Several other countries are harmonizing with this. So it will be less and less complicated. But you will be in a little bit of in between a rock and a hard spot, and that's why we recommend digital data to get you a bit of the way.
And I suppose this is a great segue moving on to the Arabesque part of this presentation, and also moving into the discussion later on as well. So I will be allowing Ina to take over my screen, and there we go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ethos team, for this comprehensive overview of the SFDR. I guess it's on everyone's lips, given the application date today. The floodgates have indeed opened. And as we just heard, well, the devil is in the data. So the good thing is everyone is in the same boat. Everyone is tackling the same data challenges as we speak. And this is what we're here to do effectively, to help design and build data-driven reporting solutions that can help meet this ever-growing field of ESG regulations. I mean, of course, SFDR is one of the regulations that has just come online, but as we all know, we have, of course, the EU taxonomy and an entire raft of other legislative measures that are coming online over the next months and years. So this will be definitely a space to watch. So this is the slide that you're currently seeing is in honor of today's SFDR, start date. We are also launching our Arabesque ESG Regulatory Resource Hub. So this is effectively a host of web resources and pages to help our clients and partners navigate through this complexity. It will be an overview of key resources, legislative provisions, as well as an overview of the regulatory and data solutions that we are launching over the next year and the coming years as well, as the regulations are becoming more and more harmonized, and we see more concrete quantitative based reporting metrics, such as, for instance, the pies that we just discussed. So if you're interested, please take a look. You have the link, the hyperlink here, so you can go over those pages yourself, and they will be updated on an ongoing basis with new content, as well as thought leadership pieces that will be publishing in the recent future. But without further ado, let me just walk you through the actual approach of the ecosystem of solutions we will be actually working on. So you saw the ecosystem overview helpfully put together by Ethos, effectively outlining the entire data value chain. So you have the asset owner and asset manager who would have to report based on the SFDR requirements, but then of course the corporates, the issuers of this data that would need to be reported are indirectly impacted by the regulation. And I always say, I think that the authorities here have done quite an interesting job in basically introducing market-driven data disclosure and transparency pressure onto the companies. And of course, the NFRD itself will be introducing its own corporate-based disclosure requirements. But with SFDR, what the European Commission has done is effectively ask indirectly corporate holdings for these 53 principal adverse impact indicators. So it's very interesting how they've designed that approach. So in that line of thinking, we are also unveiling an entire ecosystem of data and reporting solutions that will be here to help our clients navigate this ever-growing landscape of complexity. We have a variety of offerings that is in the pipeline, starting with the foundation. So the foundation is, of course, the raw data, because the devil is in the data. So without having the actual reported transparent metrics onto which to base any analysis, we'll be having to rely on proxies and data estimations, which is not the ideal case scenario, and it's not what the EU and other authorities around the world are trying to achieve. Of course, we're trying to tackle greenwashing. So even though the first reporting cycles may be relying on proxy metrics, we'll see greater and greater data availability and data disclosure coming out of the new regulatory requirements. So our first level solution is effectively the data product, and the data product will be based on starting with SFDR, and I will walk you through some concrete SFDR examples today. But once the taxonomy requirements and technical screening criteria are finalized, we'll also have a raw data product that is focusing on the taxonomy, and then similar to the NFRD, the low carbon benchmarks and other regulations that are coming online with concrete data metrics that can be quantified and reported. So this is the first one. And then on top of this, we'll be building a variety of analytics and reporting tools, both for companies and investors. So we would have a company level product and a portfolio level product focused on asset managers. So once you have the raw data, you could, of course, analyze for companies peer group performance, gap analyses. You can also provide a heat map of key disclosure areas and areas of improvement for corporates. And then the other side of the coin, for investors who want to aggregate the data on an entire portfolio level, we would be able to do that by again aggregating the data disclosures from corporate holdings, and then identifying the gaps, the red flags, and areas that are prone to engagement with corporates, but also areas where the asset managers could reconsider their investment strategy, possibly on the risks identified. I think what is very relevant to our webinar today is the advisory solution, because I think data by itself, it's rarely actionable unless it's put into context, unless it's put into a strategic level, big picture vision and analysis. So hence our good collaboration here with Ethos. We are working on a variety of different client projects with consulting partners like Ethos to basically put the data into context, make it actionable, and work together with clients to design actionable level strategies to improve ESG performance and also compliance. On top of that, we have a reporting product. So based on the SFDR and other standardized disclosure templates that are currently being unveiled at the EU Commission level, we aim to automate as much as possible the reporting process and reduce the reporting burden. So based on that, we would be able to provide automated reporting disclosure templates to clients that will be pre-filled on the basis of the available data. So this is still to come, of course. course, as these templates are being finalized. And last but not least, I just mentioned our resources pages that are already available. So this is just an overview, a snapshot of the solutions ecosystem. This is very much dynamic, very much in progress. So we'll be launching these gradually over the course of this year and next year's as we have more clarity on the regulations themselves. And maybe to dive a little bit deeper into the actual SFDR specific use case. So here we have just an overview of what an SFDR Pi data feed or data product could look like and the process that goes behind the data collection. Because of course we are dealing with the current data landscape as it is today and how it will be evolving over time. So what we have done is effectively look at the existing landscape, existing data availability. And what we found is actually there's already quite a good level of coverage of the principal adverse impact metrics, so especially the mandatory metrics. So we have found that there's quite a significant overlap between the raw level metrics that Arabesque S-Ray would be able to provide later this year against the SFDR mandatory metrics coverage. And based on that, we are designing this data feed that can be shared with both corporates and investors for their reporting purposes. But again, we are identifying these data, this data availability based on public disclosures on company reports, annual filings, websites, as well as news information. Then on the basis of that, we can provide a data gap analysis and then also engage with the corporate issuers to fill in the specific data gaps identified in the relevant use cases where applicable. Again, just to recap a bit on the RTS, the PI standards, after the February revision of the SFDR, or not the revision, but the latest report issued by the European supervisory agencies, we saw a bit of a fine-tuning of the metrics, the quantitative level metrics. So they narrowed down the mandatory disclosures to 14, and then they expanded actually then the optional disclosures to 33. In addition to that, they introduced also disclosures for real estate and sovereigns, which introduced some good, at least welcome clarity in terms of investors with multiple asset classes in their portfolios. So we see it's evolving very rapidly, and the landscape is really shifting, but at least now we have a little bit more clarity on what actually needs to be reported on a quantitative perspective. So this is the, in a way, based on this raw data availability, we can then provide this raw level data to clients and then integrate into their systems and to then reports that can be shared with the regulators themselves. This is just an illustration of how the portfolio level solution would look like. So we're working on technology tools that would enable clients to visualize much better, their portfolio holdings, the key risk areas, and the data gaps. And it's also worth noting that there's existing data that can be used already to comply with some of these, especially the first level, the level 1 disclosures on consideration of sustainability risks. We have a number of tools available in that respect, such as the S-Ray ESG scores and the UN Global Compact scores that are already now assessing corporate performance with key sustainability principles. So investors can already use these tools to assess even now the level 1 consideration of sustainability risks into the investment process. But effectively we'll be also launching a range of technology and portfolio screening tools that can enable this kind of data visualization at scale and can enable investors to take actionable decisions effectively once they have reviewed this data. The other side of the coin, there it is the company level solution. So again, as I mentioned, of course, companies will be prompted by their investors to share data as well on the SFDR metrics. So based on that, we would be able to provide a data map of the key disclosure requirements that companies are subject to, and also an overview of the data transparency, peer group analysis, and also one important aspect here is the stakeholder engagement, because we'll see companies increasingly be subject to these investor level requests that they need to fulfill. So how can we enable companies to meet those requests also at scale and not be subject to an ever-growing reporting burden? So it's really important to enable these technology-based, data-driven solutions to ensure that reporting is scalable and actionable. We have also some examples here. So this is an example of a portfolio level pie report. It's quite small font, but this is just to tell you that we are already working on some initial data samples focusing on identifying the level of data availability on the 53 now pies, both the mandatory and the optional metrics. Here you can see just a sample portfolio analysis of all the mandatory 14 criteria. The ones that are grayed out, it means we have proxy matches for those. So as I mentioned before, for some of the metrics, just given the level of data granularity required by SFDR, we would just not have that, that data availability. But you can see for the vast majority of the metrics, we do actually have the actual SFDR quantitative disclosures. So we could provide already now some initial data samples for review and for client feedback, as then the requirements get more and more integrated into processes. And then again, from a similar perspective, investors can also look into, drill down into each of the holdings and the performance of each of their portfolio holdings based on each of the SFDR pies. And then you can see here already the red flags for some of the holdings based on each of the indicators identified by the regulation. So investors can then easily identify which holdings they have to engage with, or the gaps where the holdings are not providing data, so the data can be requested again through the help of technology in the best case scenario. So this is again just an example. As I mentioned, I mean, we all know the field is rapidly evolving, and we would very much look forward to working together on effectively bringing these solutions to market, getting client feedback, and putting them into context with the help of partners such as Ethos, who actually are having the boots on the ground and working with the companies and investors themselves on improving strategies and policies over time. So with that, maybe I will pass that over back to Andreas. Thank you.
Actually,
so
we got a question for you, Ina, I think.
Yes, we did have a question here on that. The data, does the data of private assets remain visible only to the investor or to all users of the platform? And as I understand it, Maria, I think it's probably a question for you, is that the disclosing entities in charge of its data. This is correct? Yes. And they decide?
Yes, that is absolutely correct, that the disclosing entity is always in charge of their data. However, we can see that the more requests companies get to disclose more of their data and also make it public, that there can be a so to speak soft power harmonizing that towards actually making more data disclosable.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm.
And yes, so thank you. Yeah, we put together a little sort of action list here of what you should sort of start thinking and doing directly. Still, yep. Andreas, I'll let you and wrap this up with this action list.
Yes, I'll wrap this up before the Q&A. So, but if you have questions already, I know that some of you have already started sending them in. So keep on doing that, and we'll try to address them as we go forward after these sort of action lists that we have. So if you're in the financial industry, you're directly affected. So you should decide on a comply or explain approach, being the sustainability risks and the pie, whether or not your financial products are, if the risks apply to you, and if the pie, if you will adhere to the pies, basically.
Yeah, I mean, just look through. I mean, what do you have? Do you have any products or that are today with characteristics or with an objective? In that case, you know, then you are directly put under this as in Article 8 or 9. But then on of addressing the risks.
Yeah. And review current practices, processes, and products. Review and update the policies accordingly. Disclose the information and request the information from corporates, as well as review and maintain all of this on an ongoing basis. Because this is updated. Although this went live now, we are still seeing some things being updated on the sort of the future implementations, etc. So keep yourself aware of what's happening.
I mean, on the PI, there is currently a draft, as Andreas showed you on the timeline. There is a draft out now. It's coming later. And this, of course, is something that you need to keep an eye on when the final version is out. I mean, we're pretty sure it's going to be very close to what we have, but there is updates still going on in the actual data that should be disclosed finally, because that disclosure time is not here yet. It's now that's just being applied. So you do have time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have a sustainable product, define the sustainable characteristics or the sustainable investment objective, and implement a methodology to assess, measure, and monitor. Review the alignment with the EU taxonomy, and disclose the proportion of the underlying fund that is consistent with the taxonomy, as well as include this in the periodical reports / impact reports, whether or not, depending on what you call it basically. If you're outside the financial industry, but you're indirectly affected, being, say that you're a company, but you're owned by someone being affected by the regulation, then you should first of all, I think you should start a dialogue with your investor to see if they want to include the non-mandatory PIs as well in their reporting, but collect all the mandatory PI data and keep track on those risks, and perform a sustainable risk assessment and disclose your risk management approaches. Yeah, and as we said, stay updated. It is a ever-changing sort of landscape, and we've just reached one of the milestones, but the other sort of milestones are being sort of implemented as we talk, as we go forward. So stay updated. We'll try to keep you updated with our All Eyes on Finance series, but there is a bunch of other great sources. I know that Arabesque is great at disclosing what you should do and when you should do it as well. So, and we'll try to do that together. So yeah, so let's move on to the Q&A. Did we receive a question, or I thought, let's see here, because oh yeah, okay, so Malin is typing.
We have one question on pension schemes.
Yeah.
What do they need to complete and publish the quantitative template?
For pension products and pension schemes, it does differ. It does depend on the citing. So this is not. It's not a one size fits all in this case. So it will need to differ for the sort of Swedish AP funds. The one that is an IIF applies to, but not to the others, but they will be following it. For if you are retailing a pension product, yes. So this is not a one size fits all. It's probably not the answer you wanted on this question, but I think we'll have to wait out the first sort of 6 months of this to have a clear answer on that.
And also, I think worth noting that SFDR is comply or explain, right? Because if the pension products are not pursuing ESG characteristics or sustainable investment objectives, then basically the SFDR would apply just on a comply or explain basis to them. So they need to issue a statement to that effect that they are not considering sustainability risks in investment decisions. But then for products that are actually aiming to achieve those objectives or characteristics, then they would have to provide those more detailed quantitative level disclosures later on.
Yes, and it is also a member state application on this as well for some cases, and depending if it is a state or private, or if it's with organizational. So a little bit different on these.
Will the UK's decision not to join SFDR create any issues around reporting and disclosures in respect of UK companies? Is anything planned to make sure UK companies are still disclosing?
Well, I think this is a question for the UK government moving forward. I have not heard anything currently on this. Ina, you keep an eye on all information coming out and all regulatory information. Have you heard anything on this?
I haven't seen a specific statement by the UK, but well, we know that SFDR would apply even to non-EU-based asset managers as long as they have operations in the EU. So any asset manager, even though they might be UK-based, even if they have any EU footprint, they would still be subject to the SFDR. And we have actually seen a lot of interest from, I mean, extra jurisdictional impact of SFDR from clients ranging from Japan to the US, who are also scratching their heads on how do they start to fulfill those requirements, because they do have a European footprint, and hence all the questions around what if my holdings are not based in the EU, they're not subject to the NFRD, they're not subject to EU reporting. How do we deal with these challenges? And this is an open-ended question, and it again boils down to how do we harmonize this data disclosure across the board for all types of jurisdictions and geographies and different reporting regimes.
I mean, this goes back to the first question we had on if you are based outside of the EU, but do have, it all goes down to the capital flow in the European Union. So that's where really to keep your focus is on where are the assets, where's the money? That's sort of the guiding principle. We've had another question here. The quality of how is the quality of the risk assessments and reliability of data ensured? So are there any requirements for third-party assurance of any of the outputs? So there's nothing in the regulation that states that you must do this way or do that way. For the more the qualitative principal adverse impact metrics or information that you would like to be shared, they do reference to guidelines and to frameworks and to regulation. So there is reference to how you should put together, such as human rights assessments. It is reference to the guiding principles for businesses and human rights. So that would be a quality assurance if you've done it according to the principles. But there's nothing that says that you must use a third-party data, but this is data going into your annual report. This is data going into on your website. It is part of sort of legal information provided both to your investors and customers. So I would strongly recommend that you only work with data that is verified, only use information that has been checked and is not manually sort of put together or cross-reference between Word and Excel, where there is a huge problem with error, just human error. So in this case, strong recommendation to use third-party verification and have a sort of a systemized approach ensuring this, because it does go in your annual report. What the consequences of if you put faulty information in is unknown to me right now.
It is being tried in in Germany.
Yes.
Yeah. So
there is a trial right now going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is...
those were the questions that we've received so far. From our end, I think that we're handing it over for Arabesque for the closing remarks.
And yes, from us, we say a great thank you.
Yeah, if you have
questions.
Yes, and if you have any more questions that you want us to answer, please reach out to, I think that everybody's got an email from me today, but if you haven't, it's andreas.filipsson@ethosinternational.se, and I will try to answer it all your questions.
And both Andreas's and Maria's email are in the chat if you would like to request slides or have any, would like to elaboration on any of the questions.
Yes.
So in the chat, the emails are available.
Yeah.
And Maria and Ulrika, back to you.
Maria, Ulrika, Nina.
Okay, I think this has been a great run through of where we are today. And I think from my perspective, what I think is clear from these developments and with the regulation is that the ever-growing complexity of sustainability data and reporting requirements demands the introduction of technology-based, scalable, quantitative data solutions. And I think these solutions must enable market players, whether you are a company, an investor, an asset manager, to easily collect, analyze, integrate information, which is verified, into your reporting, into your practices, whether it's your business practice or your investment practices. And I think that sort of in the absence of efficient technology and analytics tools, which underpin the granular data disclosure demanded by regulators, markets will be left to identify and action the relevant information disclosure themselves. So from my perspective, collaboration and engagement between companies, their investors, asset managers, data providers, and regulators, this will be crucial in sort of improving the sustainability disclosure. So, I mean, those are some of my takeaways, that new technology is key, new forms of collaboration is key in this new sort of environment. And I'm thinking also regarding the EU action plan. I mean, part of it is to create a single language, right? With the upcoming taxonomy, this should be the common language, a single language. Now, we all know, unless you are a language wizard, it's difficult to learn a new language. And for that reason, technology is also key and collaboration is also key. And I think this is something that we should all think about. How can we work together? How can we use technology? How can we use sort of a platform for collecting, for sharing, for learning from each other? And I think I'm positive about this new sort of regulatory landscape in that it will drive collaboration. And as mentioned earlier by Andreas and Malin, we're in the same boat, right? And even though this is a EU scope, this will of course affect and have an impact on the rest of the world. We also see this from asset managers outside of the EU, but working with the clients in the EU, that they're all eager to implement the SFDR and the forthcoming taxonomy. What I would just highlight is that we focus a lot on Article 8 and 9, right? But Article 6 is something that I also think that we will see a bit of also, at least in the beginning. Just this morning, I saw a few actors in the Nordics, asset managers and some banks, changing the name of their policy from sustainable investment policy yesterday. Today, it's called responsible investment policy. And some of them are also changing the names of their products from sustainability product to just product or ESG, and they remove the ESG. That doesn't mean that these asset managers or fund providers are changing what they're already doing, but I think there is maybe a way to manage expectations and to really sort of work during this year to really understand how this should be applied. So I'd like to thank, of course, everyone for participating. Maria and Inna, would you like to comment before we close?
I would like to also say a huge thanks to everyone for taking the time. And again, I mean, we are here to help. I think that should be really the message, because everyone is struggling to figure out what to do with this growing tsunami of regulations and the alphabet soup of jargon and sustainability standards and frameworks that people are struggling with. And again, the fact that SFDR is applicable across the board to all asset managers, regardless of whether, they at least have to specify that they're not considering, they have to actively state they're not considering sustainability. So in effect, it's touching everyone. And we would like to offer our help, and please reach out to us in case you'd like to understand a little bit more about our approach in this regard. Off to Maria, if she's still with us. maybe I think she had some connection issues.
Yes, I think Maria, I don't know, but yeah. So if there's any, I just want to highlight that if you, yeah, thank you for dialing in today, and we will talk to you on the next one. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.